Well, welcome everyone. My name is Heather. It says here on the screen I am Amy, but I'll just say this again for folks that weren't on the first session. Amy, unfortunately, is in a hurricane without power, so I am doing my best to pinch hit for her. And I will let these folks introduce themselves. I know she wished she could be here if she could, and sending good thoughts her way. So in the session, we have Kelly McGuire, Ryan Saylor, and Cara Goodrich, who is joining us very early from Hawaii. So we're hoping she pops on here shortly. But Ryan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the intro, Heather. And thanks to Amy and the entire team for putting this on. I know this is, we're kind of rolling with the punches in 2020 this year, but this conference last year was my favorite conference of the year. It was great to really dive in and take a look at revenue management strategy as an industry. A little bit of background on me. I'm currently with the team at Beyond Pricing with our revenue management team there. My background comes from hotels, so working with third-party consulting in terms of revenue management with branded independent and franchise properties. But more recently, I've been with the team at Beyond Pricing. So a little bit about me.
Kelly, do you want to go this?
Sure. I am Kelly McGuire. I am the managing principal for hospitality with ZS, which is a mid-sized global consulting company, and my practice there focuses on revenue management. I have a background in the discipline, both on the consulting side, the vendor side, and also industry. I worked with MGM Resorts International for a few years. I also was with Wyndham Vacation Rentals, building revenue management and pricing solutions to support their lines of business. And in my spare time, because we're all kind of geeks here, I am the commercial advisor for a professional property management startup called Urbane Hospitality. And I'm just excited to be here to kind of compare contrast hotel and vacation rental strategies.
And I guess, yeah, my name's Heather Richer, and I'm with Richer Logic. We provide revenue management services and support in the short-term and vacation rental space. And maybe with that, Ryan, I know you're going to kick us off with this great deck, which I guess you did do a version of last year, but I'm going to go on mute, turn off my camera. We'll let you take center stage and kick us off.
Cool, sounds good. Well, yeah, like I said, my name is Ryan Saylor. So what I'm going to be going over today is really sort of taking a look at strategies between hotel revenue managers and vacation rental revenue managers. And I'm going to do this in a couple different parts here. So I'm going to take a look at the beginning, sort of at the technology capabilities that both industries have, what's used, what's out there software-wise, and then roll that into what data is available. There are some discrepancies between both industries in terms of that data that is out there to be used in some of these revenue management strategies, which I'll finish up with. We'll go over a little bit of what sort of the revenue management process looks like in vacation rentals, compare that to what currently the landscape looks like in hotels, and then we'll roll that into a discussion with Kelly, Heather, and Cara here as well to go over a couple key points and really just have another good discussion here. So I think Kelly really set us up this morning with components of revenue management to intro, sort of the start and the evolution there and a lot of what hotels have seen. So I want to start to bridge that gap with vacation rentals here and take a look at some of these components. So I want to start off with the technology side here, and going over technology and data, I kind of want to, get through this a little bit quicker, spend some time on the strategies, and then make sure we can get to that good discussion. So starting with some of the technology that we have here in vacation rentals, everybody's familiar with property management systems. These operate in a very similar manner in vacation rentals as they do hotels. Really sort of just this hub for data, guests, things like that, all living within the PMS. Channel managers are also, very familiar in the vacation rental industry. Really just born out of managing multiple channels, selling the same inventory on different channels to different guests. So really working on that basic distribution landscape and parity. Parity both in terms of inventory to make sure you're not, selling different calendars for the same property, and also parity when it comes to pricing and rate. There are current limitations with some channel managers, and we'll go over this with technology in general in the vacation rental landscape. But there is quite a bit of evolution to be had in channel managers, dynamic pricing, property management systems that we'll hopefully see down the road. Another key component of revenue management technology in vacation rentals is some of the third-party extranets. So if you're selling on any of the OTAs, you've definitely been on the back end of Airbnb, VRBO. A lot of this stuff is content heavy, whether you're adding a new property, changing photos, most of that focus is there. There's not too much when it comes to actual revenue management levers or strategies that you do within those extranets, but they are still a part of the landscape because they do ultimately face guests who could be booking your properties. And then as far as vacation rental revenue management technology, I want to finish up on this idea of a revenue management system. I know right now in the vacation rental space, this idea is sort of non-existent. I'd say the closest thing that we have to a revenue management system right now is some of the pricing tools that are available. But really, you know, this will transition us into hotels a little bit. But that idea of a revenue management system in Hub will be very important moving forward. Right now, I just think that that idea mostly lives in either the channel manager, property management system, or a dynamic pricing tool. So now flipping to hotels and taking a look at what hotels have available. Again, that property management system is sort of, you know, a baseline for operations. So hotels use it mainly in the same capacity that vacation rentals use it. And that's a great place to start, you know, your revenue management process. And that's kind of where a lot of revenue management strategy was born out of over the past couple of years. Most hotels also at this point have a separate or integrated revenue management system. I know Kelly spoke a little bit on this, but really in that separate system, quite a few things are stored and done, and that's really where a lot of those levers live that revenue managers have to pull when it comes to distribution, pricing, and overall day-to-day strategy. So those are very, very important, and we'll talk a little bit about this on the strategy side. But most revenue managers are managing rates in these systems. Revenue managers have, you know, at any given hotel, sometimes hundreds of rates to actually be responsible for. So juggling all of those at once in an efficient manner can be done in an RMS, alongside some of that inventory yielding. So, you know, hotels are also selling on 10, 20, maybe 100 different channels. So managing all that inventory can also live in the revenue management system. Channel managers act very similar in hotels compared to vacation rentals. Again, they're mostly there to really control that inventory, make sure a hotel doesn't oversell. Obviously, keeping that up to date and up to speed is pretty critical. Now, sometimes you will see a channel manager live in the revenue management system or live in the property management system, but there are, you know, third-party ones that are available to hotels as well. And then on the hotel side, finishing up with those third-party extranets, in the way that they're different than vacation rentals is that most of those third-party OTAs, for the most part, like Expedia and Booking, have pretty advanced back-end systems for hotels to work within their extranets. So looking at content, yeah, updating, you know, photos, managing reviews, things like that, all live within there. But there are also levers to pull when it comes to discounting on those individual channels, adding promotions, really working on how your hotel or your property is showing up on those search results pages. You know, Expedia and Booking and a lot of the major OTAs have really pushed hotels and hotel revenue managers in the past couple of years to focus on, you know, giving them a better deal and in turn getting better placement on some of these results pages. So that comes into play quite a bit in hotel revenue management, managing those third-party extranets when you need them and when they can actually come into play in your actual strategy. So now that we've taken a look at some of that tech, I want to come into some of the data that's available. This will really feed a lot of the strategies that are possible in both industries right now. And I've broken this down between internal and external data. So what is sort of stored and, you know, the responsibility of an internal property management team, and then also externally what's available to use. I know there are tons of great sessions coming up, and there were a lot of great sessions yesterday that talk about a little bit more in depth some of this data. So this will be a little bit more high level, but when it comes to vacation rentals, a lot of that internal data is stored in the PMS. So great historical data, great future on the books data can all live within there or somewhere else too, but for the most part, you know, coming from or living within the property management system. What's important here too is individual listing data. You know, I think this has been said multiple times, but when revenue managing a vacation rental home, if you have individual data for that property, both historical and future, that's killer for a revenue management strategy. That's, you could start there and use all that if that's all you have available, but great to have that data stored. I also want to call out CRM data. Getting more and more advanced really by the day here, using guest data, targeted marketing, things like that, all roll into a revenue management strategy, and all ultimately should be the responsibility of a revenue manager or revenue management leader on any given team. Now, also within vacation rentals, some of this external data that we take a look at really boils down to what's going on in the market. So both historical and future market data, when it comes to availability and pricing, can really inform your forward-looking revenue management strategy. And there are some key differences between the data that we use externally compared to what hotels use externally. I'd say from day one for vacation rentals, it's a lot easier to see what's going on in the market with individual properties. As kind of a quick example for what hotels sort of look at and this difference here, if I'm revenue managing a hotel and I want to see what the Marriott down the road is doing, who's in my competitive set, I can go to their website, and if they're selling, if I can book a room online, I know that they might have 1 room left to sell or maybe 100. They really sort of hide, how many rooms are still left to sell. I'm not booking room 308 or something specific. I'm booking, a generic king suite. Now, when it comes to vacation rentals, if I know the property down the street from me isn't available for the 4th of July to book, I know it's not available. It's ones and zeros at that point, and I know that I might have better leverage on that specific date. So that can be a key difference just with how inventory is managed between both industries, but definitely a benefit for vacation rentals when it comes to looking at that external strategy. Now, on the hotel side for data, very similar here when it comes to the internal data that's available. Again, a lot of that is stored in the property management system and in the revenue management system. A lot of the revenue management systems do use quite a bit of historical and future on the books data. So having that stored right in the system is pretty key. And having both of those available from a revenue management standpoint is incredibly important for hotels. I mean, I know hotels that have 10, 20, even 30 years of historical data available to really maintain an advanced revenue management strategy moving forward. And then external data. I know if you listened at all yesterday, you're probably pretty familiar at this point with STR reporting. Definitely the leader as far as hotel market reporting goes for revenue managers. And what's important here is really just making sure you're gaining fair share of the market. The indexing that is done on these reports really points to how well a revenue management strategy is performing given the respective competitive set, but definitely important to consider and really, sort of hones in on how a revenue management strategy is performing. Hotels also have forward-looking market data, but over the past couple of years, this type of data has gotten a lot more advanced. Previously, 5, 10, 15 years ago, it was a little bit harder for hotels to, look down the street and see what that Marriott had for on the books for an event coming up. Hotels like to guard that info, close to the chest for good reason. But more and more, there are, third-party reports available for hotel revenue managers to use to get an idea of, forward looking into the future, what the market looks like and how that can help their strategy. Another key external point here for revenue managers and hotels is looking at some of those OTA performance metrics. So I know Expedia, for example, has a really advanced extranet built out, and you can get some pretty granular metrics on how you're performing on that channel, which really folds into a revenue management strategy for any given hotel and really informs revenue managers on when to pull certain levers on those OTAs and how that benefits both hotels and the OTAs. So now that I've kind of quickly set up some of the tech and data here, again, there are a lot more sessions here at the conference that will kind of go over a little bit more in depth, specifically for vacation rentals data that's available. But it's important to know and consider what's available to you right now and also to you maybe elsewhere in the market to use on the technology and data side to really build a more advanced and a more efficient revenue management strategy. So now I want to take some time and go over vacation rentals right now. What does revenue management look like? And I think that's really the big question that we're trying to call out here and really shape the way that we talk about revenue management as an industry. And I want to start with dynamic pricing, not just because I work at Beyond Pricing, but because from what I've seen in the industry, I think a lot of people right now are still under the impression that if they're doing dynamic pricing, they have a solid revenue management strategy, or that dynamic pricing is equal to revenue management. And that's true to some extent, but really revenue management is this larger umbrella, and dynamic pricing is just a piece of that. Kelly pointed it out on the hotel side and the revenue management side earlier, but pricing can sometimes be your weakest lever to pull. So when you're trying to stay competitive and you've lowered pricing enough in a certain market and you're still not getting traction, what else can you do? You shouldn't continue to lower pricing. You can look elsewhere on some of these revenue management strategies to actually help you. Now, that being said, dynamic pricing is a great starting point. Obviously, having a great, healthy strategy right off the bat. In this day and age, is really just kind of the baseline. I'd say anybody who's still manually pricing, you're spending too much time actually going through that strategy and then not able to keep up with the market in an efficient manner and sort of react to changes in supply and demand. Now, alongside dynamic pricing, channel management is, an equal lever to pull when it comes to revenue management. And really in vacation rentals right now, I'd say the biggest, title right now, title fight is direct versus OTA. So I only want to sell on my direct website. The OTAs are too expensive. The guests are too different. There's no demand in my market. That could very well be true, but moving forward, it's going to be very, very important for property managers to look at what channels can they expand on in their market that would actually benefit their bottom line strategy here. So channel management will become more and more important. If you're still only selling on one channel, I encourage you to look at expanding to other channels and how that could help you. As a revenue manager, one of the major goals is sort of making sure your occupancy line stays flat throughout the year. So in low season, I know a lot of property managers who sort of just write off low season or shoulder season. It's low, it's slow, owners get it. But is there opportunity in the market, maybe on an OTA or some sort of other channel for you to drive bookings? Those are what we look to when you can't, sort of drive bookings through pricing alone. Now, I know also a lot of property managers do look at cost of distribution, and Kelly called this out earlier as well, but can be very, very important when it comes to these strategies moving forward. Right now, this practice really just lives in variable channel markups coming from the PMS or a channel manager when pushing rates and inventory to a third-party channel, and that's great. I'd say that's sort of step one in an advanced distribution strategy when it comes to revenue management. But there's a lot more we can do. I'll go over a little bit of how hotels do it, but there's definitely quite a ways to go when it comes to distribution and really giving vacation rental revenue managers more and more tools outside of just dynamic pricing to really evolve their strategy. And I want to wrap up with forecasting here because we'll talk about it on the hotel side as well. Forecasting, I would say is not incredibly popular in the vacation rental industry. I know quite a few people who do, an annual forecast for an entire portfolio. Obviously, anytime you're doing an owner projection, you're forecasting in a way what that property will do moving forward. But the frequency at which vacation rental managers do this, I think, could be increased quite a bit. And I'll talk a little bit about this on the hotel side as well, but just wanted to call it out as sort of an important trend when it comes to vacation rental revenue management strategies. So now that we've gone through this and sort of what this landscape looks like now, I just want everyone to remember, things like this is what we talk about when we talk about revenue management. It's not just dynamic pricing. There's a lot more that goes into it. So I want to make sure, if you've got something to take away from this session or this conference, really understanding what revenue management strategy is sort of step one here. And hopefully, this will help you point in the right direction. Now on the hotel side of things, this is where things get interesting, and in my opinion, where an industry we have a lot to learn from. Not necessarily saying we can take everything from hotels and just transplant it to vacation rentals. That won't work. It hasn't worked for other industries. So we kind of need to pick and choose, what's going to work best, what works best with, sort of, the environment that we have in this industry, and really what we can learn mistake-wise from the hotel and airline industry. So starting with rates in hotels and rate management, I didn't start with dynamic pricing here, and I actually don't even have it listed for hotels because it all kind of flows into this rate management and really rate distribution that revenue managers are responsible for. So I mentioned earlier, hotel revenue managers sometimes manage hundreds of individual rates, rate plans, rate codes, all kind of referencing the same thing, really just codes in the system that really are correlated to dollar amounts or dynamic pricing amounts for individual types of guests to book. So think, Apple might have a negotiated rate with Hilton for any employee that stays on business travel, or Expedia has a specific promotional rate that's loaded into a hotel PMS for guests to book and sort of maintain that connectivity. Rate management is a huge part of revenue management for hotel revenue managers right now. And again, this is where technology sort of comes into play and makes things more efficient and more advanced. It's unrealistic to manage hundreds of rates on your own manually. So a lot of that technology and the systems available come into play here for hotel revenue managers. Second to this, I want to call out yielding by distribution cost. This is something that really has evolved over the past 10 years for most of the major brands and independent hotels as well at this point. But understanding sort of the concept of net rates and knowing that if I sell a room for the same night on my direct website versus Expedia, the net rates and ultimately just factoring in the commission that I'm paying to both respective channels gets me a different net rate that hits my bottom line. So as a revenue manager, it might be great if you hit 100% occupancy, but did you sell all those rooms on Expedia and paid 13, 14, 15% commission on those? So what hotel revenue managers have been able to do is yield their inventory when demand is high and basically not give as many rooms to sort of the higher cost channels to them when they know they can get all those rooms by people walking into the hotel or booking on a lower cost channel like a direct website. So figuring out, what to sell your hotel for in a given night is less than half the battle. I'd say more of the strategy can come from where are you selling that? How are you negotiating your commission fees and channel costs here? That's a huge part of hotel revenue management and something that is sort of talked about in vacation rentals, but still, there is kind of that mindset of, it's sold, I got it sold, we hit 100% occupancy, great, let's move on. But focusing on those net rates is very, very important and something that hotel revenue managers spend a lot of time trying to figure out. Also, when it comes to hotel revenue management, that idea of marketing guest segmentation is huge. And that really can be a starting point for quite a few revenue management strategies. If you know for your hotel, you've got a solid mix of business travel, convention travel, group travel, leisure travel on the weekends or something like that, that entire mix can really set up how you're managing rates and inventory distribution on multiple channels to really maximize your strategy here. So revenue managers also spend a lot of time figuring out, when is the demand coming in for business travel, for example? How are they segmenting those guests? And part of that depends by property, right? A resort on the coast in Florida isn't getting that many weekday business travelers, but they might be working a lot more with conventions and groups, things like family reunions, and then also heavy leisure travel. So understanding that guest segmentation standpoint really, really flows into ultimately your pricing and distribution strategy as well. Also, when it comes to hotels, the idea of sort of what you're doing on some of these third-party channels can really, really take your revenue management strategy to the next step. So as an example here, managing a hotel, and let's say you've got plenty of weekday business travel, but on the weekends you're dead. Nobody travels for work on the weekends typically, especially in your market. So what do you do with those weekends? Well, on your direct website, let's say it's Hilton.com, you don't have enough demand to hit 100% occupancy on the weekends. You maybe get 10, 20% occupancy on average for weekends from your direct website. What else can you do to sell out your hotel? How can you fill the rest of those rooms and the rest of that perishable inventory on weekends? Revenue managers might look to Expedia or another OTA, somewhere where weekend leisure travelers in their market spend a lot more time booking. And here revenue managers can shift their strategy and say, hey, I'm going to have, sort of maybe a secret or targeted promotion on that channel to really drive my weekend business. That can be huge. If you can sell, for a 100-room property, an additional 5 or 10 rooms on an OTA on a slow weekend, when that star report comes in the next week, you're probably going to crush it against the rest of the comp set when it comes to that index, because everybody's in the same boat in your market, dealing with the incoming guest demand and sort of how that gets segmented through and through. So focusing on those promotions and discounts is huge. Obviously, no one's really an advocate for using an OTA or a third party, but clearly they're massive players in the industry and can really help fill in, demand and occupancy like I just described. Another big aspect of hotel revenue management strategy is sort of this forecasting point that I touched on earlier. So forecasting in the hotel industry is definitely a best practice for most revenue managers. Some forecasting comes automated from a property management system, or more so now the revenue management systems. And these are really, really used to sort of communicate to not only the revenue management team, but everybody else involved with hotel operations or hotel management, what's going on at the property and what the future is gonna look like. I'd say this year especially is sort of the biggest use case for being flexible with your forecast. If you haven't already forecasted the rest of the year for your business right now, I'd definitely consider taking a look at it. And here with hotels, the important thing to note is that it's not sort of this one and done forecast. As a best practice, most revenue managers or directors of revenue management are updating this forecast on a rolling basis. So the next 90 days, what's coming in? That's my prime booking window. I need to understand what's going on. Even something as simple as housekeeping needs a forecast to understand forward-looking, operational strategy and when to bring people in. So it really can be sort of a baseline for hotel operations that's, falls under the revenue management umbrella here as well. Something else that's important with forecast is a lot of revenue managers are commonly judged on their accuracy to their forecast. So if I forecast the entire year and I'm within 5% of that forecast, great. I knew what I needed to do ahead of time, and then I did it. So having this forecast can really be important in maintaining sort of a proactive revenue management strategy. Getting ahead of the curve is pretty much all there is to it when it comes to revenue management. You just don't want to be left stuck, same day I've got, X amount of inventory left to sell and I don't know how to sell it. Ahead of time, can you get in front of events that are coming into the market? Can you get ahead of, what happened last year and how to fix it this year? This is where a forecast comes into play and can come really, really handy when looking at a revenue management strategy. So I know that was pretty quick getting through some of these strategies that hotels actually look at, but I hope that paints a better picture at what's sort of available out there for hotels to use right now, and sort of the similarities also between our industry right now. A lot of what we've seen from hotels in the past couple of years, we can easily learn from. I don't want this to look like we're praising hotels or anything like that. Hotels have made plenty of mistakes when it comes to revenue management. And I think vacation rentals have a lot more opportunity to learn from those mistakes and get ahead. Vacation rentals in general, I think, have already been ahead of the curve when it comes to technology and adopting technology compared to hotels. So keeping up that mindset and keeping up, this energy for revenue management is already, keeping us ahead here for hotels. But that being said, I want to open it up. I know we've got, Kelly and Cara here to sort of discuss a little bit further some of these strategies and sort of what hotels have done in the past, how we can learn from them moving forward, and really, sort of open the discussion up here a little bit further into some of these key points and strategies that I made.
Okay, we have Kelly and Ryan, and I'm gonna just play the role of kind of asking some questions and getting the discussion going. And Cara, I guess, wasn't able to make it, unfortunately. I don't think she's out there.
It is very early, so I don't blame her about it.
Yeah, she's, it was very early.
Check to make sure we still have Hawaii. I mean, this is 2020, like, not to be grim about this, but has anyone checked on Hawaii today? I don't.
I know, we're hoping she's okay. Also, we tried to ping her, but we'll go ahead and keep rolling. So, yeah, lots of discussion about just revenue management across multiple industries, and then in the session really diving into the differences. So thanks, Ryan, for that. That was great, going through kind of all that detail and breaking down all those different areas. So there are key differences and key similarities. Lowering price alone is not a form of promotion, right? Like this is a fundamental truth. But an overbooking strategy is an example of something that is not really a practice in short-term rental. It's one unit. I thinking about this one, could there be a future of overbooking strategy? I don't know. the other difference is in a problem in short-term rental is you have these orphan nights or gap nights where you're trying to sell one night. Maybe you can't sell one night for a regulatory reason or for an owner preference, or right. So one night stays come with these interesting housekeeping logistics, etc. So just to name a few, but what do you see as core differences to consider? And we'll start with you, Ryan.
Yeah, I'd say one of the biggest ones for me right off the bat is sort of the types of guests that we see in the vacation rental industry. I would say hotels have a lot more, a wider range of guests that are actually booking properties. What I spoke to earlier about, business travel, convention travel, leisure travel, you can segment all of that 10 times further. And that really has a big impact on your revenue management strategy. So whether or not there are those types of travelers in the vacation rental space, right now, it's not really a focus when it comes to that strategy. So I'd say that's a really big difference that can come into play quite a bit on the actual strategy that gets implemented. And something right off the bat that I sort of noticed when starting to take a look at revenue management in vacation rentals.
What do you think are the segments, like in different types of leisure? What, like group business versus transient isn't, although, some of the larger homes can hold wedding or, bachelorette party, things like that. How do you think about segmentation?
I think that's a great example. I mean, that sort of breakdown of a larger home with, let's say, like a couple different families or a bachelorette group is something that isn't commonly seen in the hotel space. So again, just kind of one of those differences that we as revenue managers can deal with and market to and sell to. But I think looking at, even like long-term stays, snowbirds, anybody, traveling just for weekends, or, now with, coronavirus, we've seen a heavier shift to longer lengths of stay. So what does that type of guest look like? But to me, it would be pretty heavy leisure. I know in more urban markets, you can get a lot of business travelers, but we'll need to look to, things like Airbnb for business and more tools that, someone like a business traveler in the hotel world could use to actually step into our space. But I'd say right now it's still mostly leisure. And from there, you can segment a lot further if you want to, but it's not necessarily a best practice right now.
Yeah, interesting. Kelly, what do you think are some of the core differences?
Yeah, to me, I think one of the most interesting challenges and opportunities, Heather, something you sort of alluded to, which is these are individual units. And Ryan, you talked about this in your discussion as well. Hey, Cara.
Yeah.
So a one bedroom, in this location versus a one bedroom in that location, unlike in a hotel, can be very different. They have different amenities, different value propositions, different compositions. And so that is actually a challenge to really establish what it is that customers value about each of those individual units. But it's also a real opportunity. And I've seen examples in the past where you can really start to get granular in the way that you design, market, and sell these units, even down to things like, understanding what you invest in to put in the unit as an amenity and how that may drive bookings and drive value. So whether it's, do you buy a crib and a high chair, or do you buy, a hot tub, or do you invest in, some more upscale kitchen equipment? And these sorts of things, you really can, get to a very granular level of detail, which adds complexity. But as a pricing person, I think that also adds a huge advantage that this sort of cookie cutter hotel experience doesn't have. So I find that really interesting.
I love the pet friendly one too. Cliff mentioned that yesterday. We've talked about that in some other conversations, how just turning that on or off by unit is an interesting dynamic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Cara, we're so glad you made it. Can you hear us? Oh no.
I think she may be trying to join the audio.
Okay. Are you there, Cara?
I am.
Great, we can hear you.
Awesome.
So glad you made it. Are you okay to jump in if I throw a question your way?
Absolutely. I don't have visual, but I am prepared. Sorry about that.
No, we love your perspective too. Cara, for those of you that don't know, is with Castle Hotels and Resorts. So her revenue management oversight includes a mixed portfolio, which is really interesting and unique. And Cara, we're still on the first question here. Really, just in your opinion, what are the core differences between hotel and vacation rental?
Well, when I thought about it, there's quite a bit of differences and similarities. But what I wanted to put on the table as a core fundamental difference is incorporating the different owner contracts and owner expectations. So, for example, in a typical hotel environment, you'll have one or two major owners and maybe an asset manager to communicate with and to get direction on what their goals are for that particular investment asset property. Um, but when you work with vacation rentals, say if it's a 100-room hotel and you have that's one, and then you have 100 individual owners. Can you imagine having 100 different contracts, 100 different expectations, 100 different levels of understanding of business, revenue management, and some of them are ADR centric. Some of them say just fill my unit. If you talk to them about Revs Par, they're going to say, what? What is that? Right? So, and then you'll have in the hotel environment, you have a lot more educated hoteliers. And in the vacation rental space, when you have individual owners, you have those really who don't understand the market, the business, and then you have those who are very savvy. So you have to manage all of that. So it becomes uh, a challenge and an opportunity when you look at it, right?
And I think one of the reasons, at least through like the hotel lens,
Hmm.
revenue management as a discipline has a leading responsibility in owner relations, in
Yes.
talking about results, sharing, reporting. And so I think that's an important topic because this discipline really can help manage owner relations. You just have to figure out how to scale it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How do you scale owner relations and revenue management? Yeah.
Yeah, good
Does
point.
anyone have the answer to that one or?
We could talk for an hour
Oh, I'm
about that.
sorry. I thought you were hypothetical there, right?
I think that's what we're about to go into, right? How does revenue management help with that? Um, okay, so we can move on to forecasting. This is a meeting topic. So without an accurate forecast, you can't have an accurate strategy. How do hotels and short-term rentals compare on this critical revenue management best practice? And how about we start with you, Cara?
All right. Well, when we had spoken, I had, it's a whole topic in itself, right? And for this particular purpose, we can't take the whole time, of course, talking about the forecast. But what I wanted to say is, in business, in our hospitality business, the forecast is the number one most critical part of building a solid revenue management foundation. So, I kind of equate it to building a house. You need a strong foundation to support the rest of your house that you're building. And so, forecasting is one a major part of the forecasting cycle that will allow a business to have that crystal ball, data driven crystal ball, and be able to optimize and control their demand, and of course, monitor the demand. And then, whether they do it weekly, bi weekly, whether they do it for 90 days, 120 days, 6 months. The key is to start the process. Look at your business that's data driven. And we talked about all the data points. So I don't know if you want me to go through those, but I just wanted to say that it really is worth it. Castle Resorts purchased a true vacation rental company, the Chasing Rainbows, and prior leading up to that and talking to smaller vacation rental companies, they don't do a forecast. And when we purchased Chasing Rainbows, it they didn't do one either. They are doing one now, and they see the value of it because they have to look at their business in a different way. All the information is in the PMS. So it's about knowing where to find the information on the PMS, putting it in at least in an Excel spreadsheet to start, because a lot of vacation rental technology platforms don't have that platform. And start with the basics, right? And we had discussed about some of the data points that's needed because to me the toughest part in doing a forecast for vacation rental is forecasting your owner's use. You know what your out of order is, but to get your available to rent is quite difficult because sometimes owners use their units a lot and sometimes they don't, and then you have to take it out of the available rooms so your RevPAR it's not either inflated or deflated, right?
It's funny that out of order, out of service versus owner use, and I've recently started likening it to revenue management for a hotel that's in under renovation in perpetuity. Because hoteliers know that feeling of not knowing your inventory, but that's kind of what it is, right? Like it's the unknown. That's
right.
Yeah, maybe I'll go to Kelly next on this forecast one. Oh, Cara, one last thing. I believe you submitted something that will be in the workbook too that we wanted to mention.
Yes, I did. I did submit just a basic. It's a basic revenue management cycle, and Kelly and Heather. I mean, you know what the cycle is when you have forecast, optimize, control, monitor, and they all work together. But you have to start somewhere. And then I also have a basic Excel spreadsheet that you can use. If anybody wants, I can send the actual spreadsheet. Then you don't have to calculate the formulas. The formulas are already in there. So.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I guess we'll kind of loop back with Amy too to figure out how to make sure these things are provided to the attendees.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Cara.
So I'm not going to, this isn't 100% contrarian view on the forecast because I think Cara has very clearly laid out why this is so important. But I think I have probably a couple comments on this, and it is that definitely need some kind of roadmap for what's going to happen in the future in terms of planning. But I think this pandemic has sort of demonstrated how we can turn forecasting into an obsession, and it gets in the way of actually strategizing because here we have an environment with extreme uncertainty. There's no way to get an accurate forecast because things change minute by minute. And so, there is this notion that you do the best you can with what you have and then start making decisions. And what I have seen, on the extreme side is in hotels, and this is the cautionary tale for vacation rentals, revenue managers getting so obsessed with the forecast, teaching their owners to be obsessed with the forecast, teaching leadership to be obsessed with the forecast, that they tweak and obsess and change and manipulate, and then forget that the whole point of building the forecast is to set a strategy and then and execute against that strategy. So I would just say this notion of forecasting is crucially important. If you don't know what's going to happen, how can you plan for it? But be careful that you don't then find yourself in this cycle of obsessive forecasting and never actually taking any action.
I agree.
We do have some questions that are a good segue to technology. So, someone, Neil, thanks for this question, asked about, well, historical performance doesn't really help us now due to COVID. And what data tools even exist to help with a forecast? Can we recommend something? And I think that's a great segue to technology, which we had next, but maybe we spend a second and talk about the COVID impact and actually how do you forecast if you're not, really can't rely on historical. I'll throw that out there.
Yeah, for me, what we're doing right now in both our business models, our Castle Resorts and Hotels and our Chasing Rainbows is, we cannot look at year over year, but we are looking week over week or month over month, and then the buying patterns and what people are looking at. We're finding a sensitivity to things like clean fees and resort fees and things of that nature. So you need to take all of those considerations into your forecast.
Yeah, I think it
Yeah.
really is about, it's what do you rely on, and you're not looking at last year. That's very different, but you want to look at what's just happened and what is evolving. And now you're keeping an eye on different macroeconomic factors, because outbreaks in certain areas are going to impact demand into and out of those areas. And so, you got to think about what will give you that signal. But again, like here, you can't be paralyzed because you don't have this information. You've got to do the best you can, set a strategy, and then be willing to adapt it tomorrow or in 5 hours if things change. And I think that's the best piece of advice. So you do the best you can. It's probably wrong, at least it may be directionally correct, but what actions, what decisions do you make from that? And how do you adapt those decisions when you see things changing in the market?
Yes.
Yeah,
and
I would also say, I mean, in general, as a precaution, in response to this question, don't throw out your historical data. It is still going to be important, and it can
Thank you for saying
still,
that.
even now, give you quite a bit of insight into some of those high-level trends, like seasonality, for example. It'll still give you those sort of guide rails to operate within. But yeah, I completely agree with what's been said so far, and looking towards what's going in the market and how that's changing day by day can really, really help you. And I think a lot of the property managers on this call right now saw that through the summer anyway. So you kind of already saw how to best, just stay on your toes and stay agile. But a lot of that help will come from having, technology that you don't have to spend a lot of time, pulling levers or setting things up or doing things manually. That can really help you down the road, at least through, the end of this year and into next year.
One important point I always try to make is that you're always smarter than the technology. And like Neil added another comment too. Thanks, Neil, for chatting us here. Do you do it week over week? Like, we know fall is different than 4th of July, but I think what I heard kind of in summary you all said was the frequency of it and just responding quickly and paying attention. And that revenue management cycle is something that is going to have to just be more nimble as things change. Maybe we do need to wrap it up, but education is important. Everyone is trying to learn right now in our space. So how can vacation rental managers further educate themselves and begin to take revenue management action? Maybe Ryan will go to you for that first.
Yeah, I love this question. I would say if you want an easy step one, it's already done. You're listening to this call, you're at this conference, great job. This is a great step for the industry as a whole in terms of just talking about these kinds of things. And I would say another key takeaway that I've had over the past couple months when speaking to anybody is on your team, if it's just you, yourself, or a team of 10 or 50 people, have someone be responsible for revenue management. It doesn't have to be a revenue manager. Just have someone say, hey, I saw this article, go read it about revenue management, or go to this conference. Assign that responsibility, because what I think you'll find moving forward, even over the next couple of years, is that when it comes to pricing and marketing and inventory, that's all revenue management. So if you have siloed marketing and siloed pricing, and those two individuals or systems aren't talking to each other, your strategy is not optimized. So I would say starting point, just get someone responsible for it. And then that person will be able to look out for, what's coming next in the industry and help sort of evolve these discussions as well.
Cara, do you want to add anything to
Yeah,
that?
well, I'm by trade sales and marketing professional, and I started studying revenue management about 15 years ago, and then since then led teams. So the message is, if I can do it, anyone can do it, right? But my message to everyone is make a commitment to revenue management mindset, and take baby steps, because the hardest thing is to start something. It's like being on a diet, right? The hardest thing is to start, and when you're on it and you get better at it, then in a year you look really great. And that's the same thing with revenue management.
That's great. Revenue management is sexy, right? Not nerdy. So
There we go.
Yeah.
And then, Kelly, do you want to round us out?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if I were going to start thinking about how to educate myself in revenue management, I might just consider buying my book, Hotel Pricing in the Social World, available on Amazon.
Yay.
But no, I mean, that's a little bit of a plug, but I think reading, there's a lot of stuff out there. Find a few leaders that you admire, whose opinions you admire, and follow them. There's some great content if you want to really invest. Some certifications through Cornell and other places, and HSMAI, the Hotel Sales and Marketing Association International, also has a lot of great educational content and conferences. Been focused on the traditional hospitality industry for the last 90 years, but certainly evolving. And as we said, there is a lot of inspiration that we can take from other industries, and you can inspire hospitality revenue folks as well with problems from your industry. So I would say there's some good avenues for getting educated. Just remember, you've got to take all of that information that's out there and put it through the lens, not just of your industry, but of your particular business. Revenue management is very tied to operations. So it is about you got to think about that through the lens of your business.
That was, yeah, a great way to end this out. I think we lost Cara, but it was such a pleasure. This was so much fun, this panel, so thanks. And I know we went a little over, so just a few minutes here before the next session, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, Kelly,
Sounds
Ryan.
good. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.